As you all just know from the latest episode where we reviewed the found footage classic House LLC, we teased you that we had a big interview coming. And now here at Rewind of the Living Dead, we are very excited to speak to the man behind the House LLC franchise. His name is Stephen Cognetti. Stephen, we are so excited to talk to you. We just reviewed House LLC as a special episode, knowing we were going to be interviewing you. So thank you so much for taking time for us today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So I mentioned we did the review for the first film because we knew we were going to be talking about the new film with you. But can I just start by saying I mentioned on our podcast, House LLC is one of the few films that I've watched over the last few years that truly freaked me out and scared me. I'm so desensitized to horror. I love horror, obviously. I love
Yeah.
horror, but I don't get scared by horror. Like I just enjoy horror.
Right.
House LLC genuinely scared me, and that's a rare feat for me these days. So thank you for making that film first and foremost.
That's so nice. This is nice of you to say. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I both of us have our significant others with us to kind of gauge these movies often because we're so desensitized. And I had my wife with me, and of course she gets much more scared than I do, and she's freaking out on these scenes, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good." The fact that like I was like reacting to this movie, I was
Yeah.
like, "This is something special. Like this is," and I'm so glad that this came around. This interview came around, so we got a chance to talk about the original and talk about this franchise with you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
So let me start. Can I start real quick with the found footage because I'll be honest with you, Steven. Found footage is hard to do. We did a review a while ago of the Blair Witch Project, which is a movie that I adore. I saw in the theaters when it came out, and I was like, man, this movie freaked me out, scared me to death when I saw it. But ever
Hmm.
since then, like the genre exploded. But I'll be honest, like there's some rough found footage movies out there. Like there are
Sure.
just
Yeah.
Hell House reset it, and I said it on the podcast, so you can listen to it. I'm not saying it just because we're doing the interview. I said I think Hell House LLC surpassed the Blair Witch Project for me because while I still love the Blair Witch Project, Hell House freaked me out in a way that even that film didn't. You know, it scared me in a way that even that film didn't. So can I start by asking, like, your interest in found footage, how you got to that point with Hell House, and then extending even into the Carmichael Manor?
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. I still regard Hell Blair Witch as the best. I think they scared you with the unknown, and the fact that so little actually happens to them makes it feel more real, and therefore I think more terrifying. And so I think that film was just brilliant. So that was like my obviously back what was it, the late '90s when I first saw that, but um uh and then a few years later, in the early 2000s, I saw Lake Mungo, which is another film that I just adored. And then when I wrote the first draft of Hell House, it was a narrative, traditional narrative, not found footage. I didn't like it. I wanted to take a new angle at it, and then I went the found footage route, and I realized that I think the foul documentary can be freaking, can be fun too. I think it's a good way of telling a story, and it's a good way of telling horror as well. Because I think what Lake Mungo did, Lake Mungo gave me the chills the whole time I was watching it. So that was truly, I think, an inspiration for moving Hell House to that foul documentary style, and then rewriting the script, kind of going in that direction. And I love it. My kind of scare is the subtle scare, and things that just kind of make you creeped out more so than just give you that boo jump. Which we have some of those as well, though, but that the focus is more like kind of just I think less is more, and subtlety is everything when it comes to horror. That's my style, and that's what I try to put into Hell House.
It's really, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, I think back, and I think back to the first film. The scene that got me, the scene that made me love that movie, is the scene when they're doing the tour through Hell House, and the clown is standing in the doorway, and then they take it back, and then you look again, it's staring at him.
Yeah.
that sent shivers down my spine. And I'll be honest, as I said, it's hard to do that to me. I'm so desensitized to a lot of horror, but it was just really subtle things
Yeah,
like
it's the
that.
small things, like I think they're more effective than the big things. And maybe I don't know of which found footages you've watched that like didn't hit the mark, and maybe that was it, but because you could overdo things and make it, and then if you lose that sense of like reality because you're trying to overdo it on found footage, you might lose the audience there. So it is a balancing act. And I think that's the what found footage has in its favor over like a bigger studio horror is that I think it's easier to scare in found footage just because there is that sense that like, ooh, it could be real. I know it's not real, but it feels real, and because it's in that medium. So I think that's why found footage is creepy, could be creepy or creepier than some films because it has that element to it that other films don't have.
We're going to get into Origins here in a second because we know you're here to promote Origins. Congratulations on that. But that brings me to this kind of grander question, which is you are, you have the honor of being our first franchise creator director on the show. We've had some wonderful directors on the show, but let's be honest, the goal in horror is to get a franchise going. Talk a little bit about, obviously, we know why House LLC turned into a franchise because it's just a fantastic movie that begged for more. And I think the audience has absolutely wanted it. But talk a little bit about the success around the first one, birthing a franchise, and how you as a director and creator of the franchise sort of juggle that, because now you're 4 films deep, and that now you're truly in that air of a franchise director.
I guess, yeah, it's because it's never felt like that way to me. I don't think it ever felt like in a way where it was just like it was anything bigger than it was. To me, they are just low budget indie horror films, and that's what I love doing. And so with Hell House, I've just made 4 of them, so it never feels anything bigger than that. It's always just seems very I'm just making my indie films, and that's what I'm doing. So what I think is just amazing is that it has got an audience, and I think that's the toughest thing as a filmmaker is to find an audience. Where I'm very fortunate that the first one was able to scare people, which I didn't think it was. I wrote it. I wrote the scares that I like, and I was like, I hope other people find this scary. And and when I was editing it, I've gone through every frame a million times. I was completely desensitized to everything I was seeing, and I remember saying to my wife, like, "Is this even scary? I don't know if it's scary anymore." She's like, "It's scary. Trust me. You've just seen it 100 million times." And so I was like, "All right." And then it was just great to see positive buzz coming in very slowly over time. That's the thing is nothing was overnight with Hell House. It had to grow an audience over time, and that's what happens with streaming movies is you have to grow that audience very slowly. You don't have any like big marketing budget or anything. Like nobody knows about it. They just have to stumble upon it on Amazon, and a lot of people did. And that was fun, and it's been great to have like a Hell House as a fan base, which is great. But it's never felt anything bigger than just like what it is, and it is at the end of the day low budget indie horror. And I'm just happy that people enjoy it. I'm really thankful and humbled by that. And all the compliments you guys are giving me, that's great. I'm so happy that people enjoy it because we don't have a lot of resources, we don't have big budgets, and we just we make what we can with what we have and try to make it work. And it's just if it hits, it's great.
Part of the dynamic with our show is that Patrick is actually a filmmaker by trade, director, works with cameras. He's a filmmaker by trade. My actual job, normally, I'm a writer. I'm a journalist by my normal. Okay. That's my normal day job. I'm a writer professionally. So we always kind of have this like back and forth. Like he's really into the filmmaking side, and I'm really into the story side. So every podcast we do, I'm always like story. So let me ask you.
It's a great dynamic. You need to talk about both sides. So you guys have a good team.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you about House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor, because continuing the story on into a 4th film, and I saw another interview you did where you said that you had to move on beyond the Abaddon Hotel, which you burned down in the 3rd film. Spoiler, sorry. And you had to move on beyond that. But you still found a very unique way, to tie it back into the franchise, which was fascinating to me because when the film began, we had the story about the murder and going there and doing the investigation. And I was like, okay, this is a totally unique new story. When it started, when I figured out what was happening, it was tying back into the Abaddon. I was like, oh, this is a really slick, cool way to get back in there. Like creating that story, because you're carrying on a franchise that now has a fan base. Hell House has a fan base, but you're kind of moving beyond the Abaddon Hotel. So how did you decide to craft that story? What was the inspiration for the Carmichael Manor, but then finding a way back in to the Hell House franchise? Because I was when it happened, I was like, oh, that was really slick way to get back in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could go two different ways. I could have just made a completely independent, not related found footage movie, or I can make a movie that's in the world but still original, and that's the route I went. And I wanted to make a new. I think that I was running. I had trouble creating scares in 2 and 3 just because they were in the same location. And so, like, I remember joking with a friend. I'm like, "There's only so many things we can have happen in 2C." In the room 2C, we can't just like keep on writing new scares in 2C. It's like, so like I was like happy to have burned it down, and if I ever come back to it, it has to be something else completely. And then find fun ways to kind of connect it together, and that was the part of the writing process that was a lot of fun. Writing a draft, second draft trying to connect things better, third draft trying to connect things, make it the layers even deeper and connecting them. That's what I like doing in writing, but I did want to make an original ghost story and just have it in the world of, have some connective tissue to the movies, but not be like a direct sequel where it's fully like dependent on the movies that came before it. So and then I wanted to go something like more like have it like true crime documentary, and just have like something you would see on Netflix, but instead of it being like, the Murdoch murders, but like it's something like that, but it's more about ghosts and it's something on the paranormal side and of an unexplained murder. So that's how that process came about. And just start writing, and the story just kind of fleshed itself out as through the drafts.
I don't have, just to be clear, I don't have coulrophobia. I'm not scared of clowns. Like, that's never been, like, I love Pennywise. I love clowns. But, like, do you have a copyright on the creepiest, freakiest clowns in film and cinema? Because the clowns in Hell House actually do freak me out a little bit. Like, even, like, when you did, obviously the first one, I mentioned the scare that really got me in the first one. This one, when they go into that room for the first time and they have the mannequin standing there, I'm just like, dude, it reminds me of, have you seen the old, like, 1920s Halloween costumes when kids would dress up as, like, Halloween costumes?
That was the inspiration. That was 1,000%.
They're terrifying.
Yep. I sent the costume designer, the clown, the people that made the masks, all those like black and white photos from back in the day, and said like, this is what I want to base it off. So it's funny that you brought that up, because that was definitely, those are creepy, and those and if we could do anything to kind of try to. There's a whole, I loved putting those photos, those old archival photos of the clowns, even though it wasn't back in the 20s, more back in the 70s though, but still it's having that old archival looking clown. I thought was really creepy. So you're right. But also I think less is more on the clowns. So I think clowns that aren't overdone, don't have like big goofy noses or stuff like that, I think are creepier. And I think that's what the clowns of that day, that era you're talking about, had more of, and that's why they're creepy.
And this is more a statement than anything, but it's these clowns in particular, they can scare you just standing there. That's such a fun part of it, because it's like, you're right, they're not overdone. They're not killer clowns from outer space, which are like, these heightened clowns. You're like, is that someone in a mask, or is it a mannequin? It plays on a very base, the idea of like the uncanny. Is it real or not? And you just, if you're constantly questioning, it works out so well. So it's a very, very genius but simplistic way to do it. And I think that's what I really appreciate. We talk about on the show all the time, go simpler. Like, sometimes you want to make a story complicated, but the ones we truly enjoy are the ones that keep it simple. I'll ask this question now. I consider you an expert on found footage at this point. You've done a few films. You're certainly steeped in the genre. I've noticed, and I watch a lot of found footage, I noticed there's two schools of found footage, and I think you've employed them both, and I'm just kind of curious your take on
Mhm.
using both. One is sort of the Blair Witch Lake Mungo Hell House LLC style, which is docu found footage. It's a
Mhm.
documentary laced in with footage that truly feels found. You get into moments late, you get into conversations late, you cut out before you need to see something. It's hard to see certain things. It creates a certain different element. And then
Yeah.
there's a whole other genre, subgenre within found footage that's sort of more running footage and could almost play like a fictional film where the footage is running the whole time and you're getting into conversations that you wouldn't normally get into with a camera on, but we have this fixed POV. Talk a little bit about,
Like, give me
because
an example of like, would you describe like the paranormals as that style, or like what's your?
paranormal's a little bit fixed POV. I would say Deadstream that just came out is sort of like there's things running that are like a lot of the VHS movies. The footage is running when you're like, I think we would have turned the camera off at this point.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Understood.
And I think Origins plays that card a little more, where it's like, I think the camera would have turned off, but we're going to keep it going. And I'm just curious, making the choice in Origins, and I apologize, I have not seen 2 and 3, but I have seen Origins in the original, using that technique over the very like simple, like the more simple style of like, we captured some footage and here's your little pieces of it. This one, you get more of the narrative as the camera rolls. What was your take on deciding to kind of play it that way this time?
So I actually think that the way I have two different schools of thought on categories, I guess, of found footage. And one being the why are we seeing this footage and how is the footage presented to us? And I think a lot of found footage doesn't answer that. They don't have to. It's presented to us. I think Blair Witch is one of them. It's kind of like their footage was found. Here it is. We don't know why we're seeing it, why certain cuts are made, and why we're shown what we're shown. But we are just assuming there's a lot on the editing floor that we haven't seen, but someone presented it to us. But then there's the other ones where we say exactly why we're seeing this footage, which is Lake Mungo and Hell House as well. Someone put it together as a finished documentary, so that is the reason why we're seeing this found. So it's like it's a fictitious person in post-production who made the decisions on how much we're going to see and then presented it to us, which is different from Blair Witch, Paranormal, where we don't ever have that explanation of why we're seeing what we're seeing. All we're just told is that these people died, this is their footage, and you get it. And so but that's why it can be, for something like Lake Mungo and for Hell House, you can make narrative decisions in the cut, because we're telling you that this was cut together by someone. This is a finished documentary. So of course those kind of decisions in post-production can be made, in the world, I mean, post-production within the world. And so it can be presented in a way that seems more narrative, but it's still found footage. So those are the two different distinctions I make, which I like. I guess, I like the former. I mean, the latter, which is the way that, I styled the docu horror, and we tell the audience exactly why they're seeing what they're seeing. And that this is completed. This is not just like raw footage they're watching. This is footage that has been gone through by someone, and the selected parts have been taken out to show the audience, to tell the story of what happened to these people.
Do you have an opinion on which of those versions you think produces more scares? I'm just curious.
Oh, I don't. I think it's a taste thing for the creator. Because I think Blair Witch is terrifying. I think Lake Mungo is terrifying. So I don't think one is better than the other. I think it's just a preference of how the filmmaker wants to tell the story. And for me, I just always wanted to have an explanation for why we were seeing footage. So that's why I went on and said, like, this is a completed documentary, like getting that out there in the beginning. You're not just seeing random raw footage, but that is not to say that was better in any way. So
sure, no, we're not making that distinction.
It's purely just a preference thing. So that's why I think either one, both of them are just, good. I mean, as you said before, like you have to, and the movie has to be good to begin with, but there's no better way of doing it. I think it's just a taste thing.
Yeah, which tool to use for which
and I think
story you're telling.
I think some of it, I don't think you can just I think something might go with the story. I think it might be harder to justify that this is a finished documentary or something like that. I think Blair Witch could have done that. They could have obviously said, like,
Yeah.
we found their film, this is what happened. And they could have layered it a little bit more with, like, if they wanted to, but the way they did it was less is more. And I love that. And they didn't
Yeah.
need to exposition with interviews or talking heads or anything. They just showed you what they said is raw footage, and it was terrifying. And so that's why there's no way is better than the other. It's just how they want to do it, and both, I think both are great if done
And I
well.
do, and I do see how in Origins, and this is something again, this was the insight I was looking for. You see it as there is somebody completely off camera who has assembled this to tell this story.
Yeah,
and
you hear off camera sounds, off camera questions being asked in time,
right. So you go, and that was the insight I was looking for, really. Thank you for that distinction, that idea of here is someone presenting all this footage to us the way they wanted to cut it together, what they wanted to show. Out of all the raw footage, they're guiding you along. So that's very
creative decisions made in post-production by someone who. So in the first one, Hell House 1, I even tell you who that is. It's Mitchell.
Right.
Mitchell is the person who's the only lone survivor of that documentary crew. He finished the documentary, and the reason we the audience are seeing it at all is because he assembled everything himself, and he presented it to us, and that's why we're seeing it.
Yeah, I think it's a unique take that I think you spell out a lot clearer than a lot of other found footage filmmakers, good or bad. It's not a judgment call. It's just something I picked up.
It's completely preference, taste, and just either one's fine. But I could see, like, it's just as scary going the other way too, and just seeing the raw footage and knowing that it hasn't been manipulated by knowing that there were not creative cuts in there for the purpose of, like, someone doing that for a narrative. So I like both ways.
So 2 last questions. We'll get you out of here on this. One, I want to ask, because we mentioned the found footage stuff. I'm kind of curious because I'm not that I need to tell you how to run your franchise by any stretch of the imagination, but you've delved so deep into the mythology, which I love. I'm kind of curious, like, is there a version of Hell House, whether we're talking about a prequel or sequel, like, is there a version of Hell House where you would do it without found footage? Have you thought it? Because I know you've done non-found footage stuff before. Like, I'm curious, like, is there a Hell House that wouldn't be found? Would you ever consider that?
100%. I've thought about that many times. Actually, it's funny. Like, every time, every new script I go into, my first thought is, maybe I could do this narrative, and then I was like, nah, I'll stick to found footage. So the first draft of every script I went into on 2 and 3, and even 1, 2, and then 4. My thought is, like, what if I can do this non-found footage? And then I always talk myself out of it, going back to found footage. But I think I'm at the point right now, if I make another Hell House, I think I am done with doing that route. I would love to make a narrative, traditional narrative shot horror film in the found footage world, and not a found footage movie. And the only thing is like, it costs a little bit more to do that, but I think it depends on the script. If the script is not something that's a little too grand that we don't have the budget for to do it narratively, then I think it can be done, as long as we what I got to do is I got to write the script and then look at it and say, is this achievable on the means that we have? And I think personally, I think it could be, and I would like to do that.
So my last question, from a story perspective, one thing I loved about Origins, as I said, diving back into the mythology, going from, like, the Andrew Tully, and then obviously with the Carmichael family and all the ties and everything you did there, it kind of reminded me, I hope you don't mind me making this comparison, it reminded me a lot of the first season of True Detective, where they continuously introduced the mythology and the background of these characters, and I was obsessed with that first season of the show. Like, I was reading everything I could read. I was reading books. Like, it was just so fascinating. Yeah. And, like, it was an anthology. So, like, every season since then, I've been like, can they go back there? Can they dive into it more? Can they figure out what was actually going on with that weird cult family in New Orleans or whatever? So can I imagine, like, you already have ideas for future Hell House stories, but I'm curious, like, would you ever want to delve into more, like, in the mythology, like the background of it, or do you feel like you need to move this forward? Because I think there's a lot of different directions you could go with this series. But now that you did it in Origins, where you reintroduced it and you kind of like, I want more. I want you to pull more at that thread. Like, I'm fascinated by everything you introduced with the Carmichael family, and I'm like, hold on now. There's even more there that we need to learn about this entire death cult and everything that was going on.
100% that I would love to have gone backwards too. And I did write 120 pages of script about what happened with Tully, the cult, how Tully met, those other clowns in West Virginia, and everything leading up to the suicide. I've written out so much story about that. The materials there. The two things that are stopping me are A, budget, and B, the fact that the Abaddon Hotel itself, as it exists, is an attraction right now. It's the Waldorf Estate of Fear. It's where we shot the first 3 movies. That has changed so much from when we originally shot it that it would just be such a huge undertaking to try to transform it back to what it originally looked like and film in there, make it seem like it's the 80s. So if we wanted to do it, it would almost take like set building. And we don't have the means to build sets, like that we film on location in locations that we find. We don't have to build anything from the ground up. And the way that the Abaddon Hotel is right now, because all haunted attractions, they always have to like update their haunts every year. They add on things, they take down walls, put up walls here and there. So it's just to go back in time would be very tough for that reason alone. And I guess that all ties back to budget. You only have so much budget, and so to make a period piece A and then also make it in an Abaddon hotel where it's just a completely different place now. It would be too big of an undertaking. So my idea was like, well, I still want to have some themes from the 80s, but I want to make it present day. So present day shoot, but still get some of the breadcrumbs from the 80s story in there as much as I can. Budget friendly wise as well.
And you said the next one to play again. Obviously, I know it's nothing done yet, but you said the next one will be a narrative story. You plan on doing that and getting away from the found footage for the next one. That is the plan.
Yeah. So I don't know when or if the next one is coming. I do have a story for the next one. I would like to shoot it narratively. I just don't know when that's going to be. If that's going to be my next project, it very well might be my next project. But as of right now, I'm kind of working on a few different things, and I just don't know yet where I'm going. And if it does go to Hell House, yeah, I think that would be the goal, to make a narrative story, not found footage, for the next one. Yeah.
Well, if I had studio money, I would throw it all at you and tell you to make whatever movie you wanted, because I say this again, I always, I tell this whenever I compliment anyone I'm talking to, I say, make sure you understand, I'm not saying this just because I'm speaking to you, but in all honesty, I adore this franchise. I think it's an incredible franchise. Like I said, in my opinion, it's surpassed all of my other found footage franchises that I've enjoyed, because it genuinely scared me. Carmichael Manor genuinely scared me. So keep up the incredible work. I love House LLC Origins. The Carmichael Manor is currently available on Shudder. Amazing film. And whatever you do next, I'll be watching. If I could throw all the money at you to make the next one, I would. But whatever you do in this franchise, whatever you do next, we'll be watching. And sincerely, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for making such an incredible horror franchise. And as I said, we look forward to what comes next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's so nice of you to say. Take care.
Absolutely.
You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, so hopefully we can speak again, maybe the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Stephen.